Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Divinity and Divine Services. Vyasa uvacha iti samprashna samprishto vipranamrau maharshanihi pratipujya vachastesham pravukto mupachakrame.
Translation: Ugrashva Sudha Goswami, the son of Brahmasharan, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply. Do I read the purport, Prabhuji?
No.
Okay, just the translation. Okay, thank you.
Text 2. Suta uvacha yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano viraha katara ajuhava putreti tanmayataya taravo binedus am sarvabhuta hrudayam munimanatosmi.
Translation: Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances onto that great sage, Shukdev Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the high caste, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'O my son!' Indeed, only the trees which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation echoed in the response to the bereaved father."
Text 3. Yasvanubhavamakila shrutisāramekam adhyatmadīpamatiti tīrshatam tamondam samsārinām karunayāha purāna guhyam tam vyāsasūnumupayāmi gurum munīnām.
Translation: Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who, out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of the Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience.
Text 4. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet.
Translation: Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances onto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, onto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, onto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and onto Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Munaya, text 5. Munaya sadhu prishtoham bhagavad pirloka mangalam yatkruta krishna samprashno yenatma suprasidati.
Translation: O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self.
Text 6. Savai pumsam karo dharmo yato bhaktiradokshaje ahaitukya pratihata yayatma suprasidati.
Translation: The supreme occupation dharma for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendental Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self.
Text 7. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayatyashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayadahaitukam.
Translation: By rendering devotional service unto this personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world.
Text 8. Dharma swanushthitah pumsam vishvakshena kadhasu yaha notpadayadyadiratim shrama eva hi kevalam.
Translation: the occupational activities a man performs according to his own positions are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead.
Text 9. Dharmasya hyapavargasya nartortayopakalpate nartasya dharmaikantasya kamo labhaya hi smrutaha.
Translation: all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification.
Text 10. Kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jignasa narto yakchesha karma bihi.
Translation: life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self preservation. Since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth, nothing else should be the goal of one's works.
Text 11. Vadanti tattvasvid sattvam yajnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate.
Translation: learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan.
Text 12. Tajraddhana munayo jnana-vairagya-yuktaya pashyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shruta-gruhitaya.
Translation: the seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes that absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Sutti.
Text 13. Atah pumbirtvijashreshta varnashrama vibhagashaha swanushtitasya dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam.
Translation: O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the personality Godhead.
Text 14. Tasmadekena manasa Bhagavan Sattvatam Patihi Shrotavyah Kirtitavyascha Dhyeyah Pujaschcha Nityada.
Translation: therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees.
Text 15. Yada Nudyasina Yukta Karma Granti Nibandanam Chindanti Govidastasya Ko na kuryat katharatim.
Translation: with sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of recreational work, karma, by remembering the personality Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message?
Text 16. Shushrusho Shraddhadanascha Vasudeva Katharuchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punyatirtha Nishevanat.
Translation: O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity by hearing the messages of Vasudeva.
Text 17. Shrunvatam Swakatah Krishnaha Punyashravana Kirtanaha Hyadyantasto Hyabadrani vidusoti suhrutsatam.
Translation: Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, super soul in everyone's heart, and a benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Gita Mataji and Chitraleka Gopi Mataji, for your wonderful recitation of both Sanskrit and English. So, dear devotees, welcome to today's session of Chat Plus. We continue reading and discussing Srimad Bhagavatam. And today, at the moment, we are doing chapter number 2 entitled Divinity and Divine Service. So today we shall be discussing text number 10. So before we do so, let's recite the Mangala Charanam prayers like we normally do. And I'll just make sure that everyone's muted. Okay, that's done. So you can also recite with me. We unmuted mics. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Gunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namine, Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine. So dear devotees, so text number 10. Kamasya nindriya pritir labo jiveta yavatha jivasya tattva jignasa nathayascheha karmabhi. So word for word synonyms. Kamasya, of desires. Na, not. Indriya, senses. Priti, satisfaction. Labha, gain. Jivata, self-preservation. Yavata, so much so. Jivasya, of the living entities. Tattva, the absolute truth. Jignasa, inquiries. Na, not. Arthaha, end. Ya, chahiya, whatsoever else. Karma, occupational activities. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The completely bewildered material civilization is wrongly directed towards the fulfillment of desires and sense gratification. In such civilization, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. In politics, social service, altruism, philanthropy, and ultimately in religion, or even in salvation, the very same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. In the political field, the leaders of men fight with one another to fulfill their personal sense gratification. The voters adore the so-called leaders only when they promise sense gratification. As soon as the voters are dissatisfied in their own sense gratification, they dethrone the leaders. The leaders must always disappoint the voters by not satisfying their senses. The same is applicable in all other fields. No one is serious about the problems of life. Even those who are on the path of salvation desire to become one with the absolute truth and desire to commit spiritual suicide for sense gratification. But the Bhagavatam says that one should not live for sense gratification. One should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation and not for sense gratification. Because the body is made up of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, they are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses. But the senses are not meant for unrestricted enjoyment. For example, marriage or the combination of a man with a woman is necessary for progeny, but is not meant for sense enjoyment. In the absence of voluntary restraint, there is propaganda for family planning. But foolish men do not know that family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. Seekers of the absolute truth are never allured by unnecessary engagement in sense gratification, because the serious students seeking the absolute truth are always overwhelmed with the work of researching the truth. In every sphere of life, therefore, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth. And that sort of engagement will make one happy, because he will be less engaged in varieties of sense gratification. And what that absolute truth is explained as follows. So this is a very beautiful, very relevant verse, especially in these ancient times, spoken by Sri Sutta Goswami. So the context of this verse, just for those who may be joining us, this chapter is called Divinity and Divine Service. So in the first chapter, the sages from Naimisharanya had asked 6 questions. 7 verses, Sutta Goswami firstly offers his obeisances to his guru Shukdeva Goswami. He then glorifies the sages' questions. And then in text number 6 and 7, he answers the first 2 questions. And if we can recall, what were the first 2 questions? The first question was, what is the ultimate good for all people? And the second question was, what is the essence of all the scriptures? So Shukadev, Sutta Goswami had explained that the ultimate good is bhakti, and that bhakti has to be of a certain nature. It has to be uninterrupted and unmotivated. Ahoituki apratihata. Then only will it be able to completely satisfy the self. Yayatma suprasidati. So he's answered the first question, that bhakti is the ultimate good. And then he answered the second question in text number 7, Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. And that verse is that by serving the Lord in devotional service, then automatically Gyan and Vairagya come. So having explained these two very, very important answers to these two very important questions, he then starts to explain about prescribed work. And we know, according to Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas, every living entity, according to the modes of nature one has acquired, one is forced to execute prescribed work. And Sutta Goswami explained that that prescribed work, which comes to everyone naturally, the end result of all that prescribed work has to be bhakti. And in verses 8 to 10, he's been talking about the occupational duties and the goal. What is the goal of one's occupational duties? Every one of us has occupational duties, at least in terms of ashram. Some of us are children, some of us are parents, some of us are husbands, some of us are wives. Some of us may be retired, and some of us may be in the renounced stage. So all of these stages in life, one has to have prescribed duties. But the ultimate goal of all these prescribed duties is bhakti, and not sense gratification. Once Srila Prabhupada went to an Indian gentleman's house, and externally this Indian gentleman was performing all of his duties so nicely. He seemed to be the perfect husband. He seemed to be the perfect father, loving his children. He seemed to be the perfect provider for the family. And he was religious. And when Prabhupada went to his house, he was saying, yes, this is my wife, this is my daughter, this is my son, this is my grandson. And he was introducing everyone. And Prabhupada, just under his own breath, he said, yes, and this is my sense gratification. So all of these, people who are very religious, they may be proud of it. But unless the goal is bhakti, it is simply sense gratification. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes so beautifully. He says, in all spheres of life, the ultimate end is sense gratification. Prabhupada lists them. In politics, it's sense gratification. And Prabhupada explains how the politicians, they speak which appeals to the citizens' sense gratification. And the citizens, they'll only vote to the politician who promotes the sense gratification. In social service, it's same. In altruism, it's same. In philanthropy, it's same. And Prabhupada says, even in salvation, we find this desire for sense gratification. Someone may ask, how? how is there sense gratification in salvation or liberation? And Prabhupada said, the ultimate sense gratification is when we desire to become God. Because God is the supreme enjoyer. People think, I also want to be the supreme enjoyer. And this is Mayavad philosophy. The ultimate snare of Maya. I want to become God. So this is going on in the world, that every facet of life, the goal seems to be sense gratification. But Bhagavatam teaches us differently. So I was just explaining, what verse 8 said, that why Varnashram is not parodharma. It is useless if it does not provoke attraction for the Lord's message. And text 9 said occupational duties are meant for ultimate liberation. And life's desires should not be directed towards sense gratification. Very, very important message of the Bhagavatam. Sutta Goswami has explained what is life's ultimate goal. And now he's explaining what is not the ultimate goal. So in the verse itself, it says here, life's desire should not be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life of self-preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. And Prabhupada used to say the entire Vedic philosophy is simple living, high thinking. That motto perfectly encapsulates the purport of this verse. That as far as possible, one should try to live a simple life. Prabhupada says, healthy life, we do not neglect the body. And in the purport, Prabhupada says the body has needs. Ahara, nidra, bhaya, maituna. Eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Prabhupada says that's needed. Yeah. But human life means regulated life. We should always be regulated. In one lecture, Prabhupada gave a lecture on this particular verse. I was listening to it today. And in the lecture, Srila Prabhupada quotes his famous verse, which he's quoted many times from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, text number 18. Tasyaiva I forgot to automatically set it to mute today. Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet Brahmaloka down to the lowest planet Patala. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time. Just as in course of time we obtain miseries even though we do not desire them. So Prabhupada, when he quoted this verse, Prabhupada says, from the time we are born, we are allocated a certain amount of happiness. And we are allocated a certain amount of misery. That cannot be altered. That is what is our due to our karma. So what if that is an established and accepted fact? What is the use of one endeavoring very hard for that which is not possible to be obtained, which is sense gratification? That will come automatically. And Prabhupada quotes how sometime a child is born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Prabhupada says that in the lecture. So why waste time for that which is firstly temporary, and secondly, that is already established? Rather, direct our attention to that which is permanent, that which is not obtainable even from the highest planet to the lowest planet. Prabhupada is saying that from Brahma Loka down to Patala Loka, it's already written. It's written in our books what happiness and distress we are destined for. So focus our attention on, as this verse says, Tattva Jignasa. Tattva means the absolute truth, and Jignasa means inquiries. Prabhupada would often say the very first aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra. The Vedanta Sutra is the entire verse Vedanta summarized in sutras. The very first sutra is Atato Brahma Jignasa. It starts off with the word now. Which book ever starts off with the word now? But the Vedanta Sutra starts off with the word now. Now what? Now that we have the human form of life, what should we do? Brahma Jignasa. We should inquire into the nature of the Absolute. That is the first duty of the person who has got a human form of life. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text number 22, Lord Krishna speaks a very, very important verse. And there the Lord says, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery. And what are the sources of misery? Which are due to contact with the material senses. So Krishna is saying those who are intelligent, they do not take part in anything to do with the contact of the material senses. Why? O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end. And so the wise man does not delight in them. So yeah, Krishna is very categorically saying intelligent persons do not endeavor for sense gratification, which becomes the source of misery. And such so-called happiness, it has a beginning and an end. And the very same theme, very same verse was also spoken by Lord Rishabdev. This is a verse quoted by Srila Prabhupada very, very often. Some of you may even know it by heart. Nayam deho deha bhajan niloke kastan kaman hardate vid pujam ye tapodivyam putraka yena sadvam suyad yasmat brahma sukyam to anantam. So this is Lord Rishabdev speaking to his sons. And he's giving his sons instructions. And just like a very caring and dutiful father gives his sons instructions, Lord Rishabdev gave this very, very important instruction to his sons. And Lord Rishabdev told his sons, my dear boys, of all the living entities who have accepted material bodies in this world, 8,400,000 species of living entities, one who has been awarded this human form should not work hard day and night simply for sense gratification, which is available even for dogs and hogs that eat stew. One should engage in penance and austerity to attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activity, one's heart is purified. And when one attains this position, he attains eternal blissful life, which is transcendental to material happiness and which continues forever. So Lord Rishabdev is telling his sons, you have attained a very, very rare and a very beneficial form of life, of the 8,400,000 species of life. You got the human form of life. And if you got a human form of life, if you simply act and behave in the way that the dogs and hogs do, the hogs and the dogs, they eat. The hogs and the dogs sleep. The hogs and the dogs mate. And the hogs and the dogs defend. If your life is simply focused on those four activities, you are wasting your life. So what should you do? Tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam. You should engage in penance and austerity. Prabhupada says, this is what human form of life means. Human form of life means one should perform austerity. One should not indulge the senses. We should perform austerity. And by performing this austerity, why we should perform this austerity? Not just for the sake of performing austerity. That austerity is there to help us attain the divine position of devotional service. By such activities, one's heart becomes purified. By austerity, we become purified. And Prabhupada explains that for the devotee, the austerities the devotees have to perform is one should rise early, before the sun rises. Everyone should do this before the sun rises. Human form of life is meant. Human beings should get up during the Brahma Muhurta hour. And then one should take bath. And then one should glorify the Lord by chanting his holy name and hearing the Shastras. And then one can eat. But one does not eat any food which is not offered first for sacrifice. That is the austerities for the devotees. One should only eat food that is offered first for sacrifice, meaning offered to Krishna and then becomes prasadam. This austerity we have to perform. And then Prabhupada, in this lecture, says something very important about austerity. Prabhupada says we should offer this Krishna consciousness to for those who have no information that there is something far greater than sense gratification. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Jeev Jago, Gora Chandra Bole. That you've been sitting in the lap of Maya for so long. Wake up, sleeping soul. Wake up, sleeping soul. Wake up, sleeping soul. A devotee who has learned that no happiness can come from sense gratification. It is so clear. Such clear declaration made by the Lord. Such declaration, who experienced in his own life how one becomes purified through restraining the senses, how one's heart becomes purified. One has that experience, one should give this knowledge to other people. Because Prabhupada says they are just going down very, very fast down to hell. So everybody wants to see everyone happy. So spiritual life means austerity, tapasya. So sometimes people ask the question, why? Why unnecessarily, like sometimes people think you are completely crazy. You tell them, I got up at 3:30 this morning, I took a bath, I went to the temple for Mangal Arati. The people think you are crazy. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what is day for those who are sense joyous and what is night for them. For the transcendental, it's different. So the animals only have the ability to project their consciousness outward. That's what animal life means. The only way they can project their consciousness is outward through the senses. They don't have any ability to project their consciousness inward towards the absolute. Animals don't have that ability. They can only respond to the senses. But the human being has the ability to project his or her consciousness inward towards the soul, towards the absolute truth. And if one is trying to project one's consciousness inward, but at the same time, through engagement of the senses, one is pushing one's consciousness outward, there is a contradiction. If one has two boats on the water, one tries to put one foot in one boat and another foot on the other boat, we all know what happens, isn't it? Boats go sideways and we fall in the water. So it's not possible. Those people who advocate, one can do whatever one wants and still practice yoga. It's a farce. Because one cannot simultaneously project one's consciousness inward while at the same time pulling it outwards through indulgence and engagement in the senses. That's not possible. I just want to conclude with Shukadev Goswami's advice of how we can live simply. It is a bit extreme, and maybe many of us will not identify with this. But Shukadev Goswami he's saying something very important. He's establishing the principle. So let me share my screen. So this is from the second chapter of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Shukadev Goswami starts off by saying, for this reason, the enlightened person should endeavor only for the minimum necessities of life, while in the world of names. He should be intelligently fixed and never endeavor for unwanted things, being competent to perceive practically that all such endeavors are merely hard labor for nothing. So true, isn't it? We can endeavor so hard for sense gratification, but it's just so temporary. So then he goes on to say from text 4 and 5, he says, when there are ample earthly flats to lie on, what is the necessity of cots and beds? He's talking about sleeping here. He's saying the earth is there. We can just sleep on the earth like how the sadhus do. When one can use his own arms, what is the necessity of a pillow? He's saying Krishna has given you these arms. You can just use it as a pillow. When one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of varieties of utensils? When there is ample covering or the skins of trees, what is the necessity of clothing? Are there no torn clothes lying on the common road? Do the trees which exist for maintaining others no longer give alms in charity? Do the rivers being dried up no longer supply water to the thirsty? Are the caves of the mountains now closed? And above all, does the Almighty Lord not protect the fully surrendered souls? Why then do the learned sages go to flatter those who are intoxicated by hard-earned wealth? So this is Shukadev Goswami. This is like the right at the other end of the spectrum of living simply. In this Kali Yuga, this is not, but the principle being there. And the principle being there that we have all the necessities are there. Whatever becomes hard labor is simply falling under the category of indulgence in most cases. It's falling under the category of indulgence. So it's already 8:32. Maybe I should stop here and take any questions or reflections that anyone may have.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my Dandavat Pranams, Prabhuji. Mamta is here.
Hare Krishna, Mamta.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. At the last, just before the Sukadeva Goswami's thing you've read, prior to that you were explaining about the soul inward and outward, sucking out and inward. Please, can you give another example or something? A little bit. I'm not yet... Maybe I have to read more, but if you could give another example, it'd be really great, Prabhuji. I'm still confused with that part. So.
Okay. So suppose I am a person that I feel I need to indulge my ears. Yes? I need to indulge my nostrils. I need to indulge my eyes. I need to indulge my tongue. Right? The senses, just by nature, they pull the living entity in terms of they divert us away from our goal. When one indulges in sense gratification, one forgets that these senses are simply temporary. So by nature, when one engages the senses, and in particular, one indulges the senses, it's very difficult to pull one's consciousness to think who I am. I mean, every one of us has practical experience. Just think of a time where you just simply went to indulge yourself. In that moment or in that period, it's very difficult to start thinking, I am eternal servant of Krishna. This material world is a place of suffering. I am a spirit soul. I am a spirit soul. So the point, Mamta Mataji, I was trying to make is that the whole Vedic, even Krishna says that in, I read from chapter 5, verse number 22. You'll see all of the verses, I think it's 19, 20, 21. Krishna says, take your consciousness inward. Draw your consciousness inward. And maybe I'll just read that to you.
We get easily distracted, na Prabhuji, and that is more inviting.
Yes, when it's like mixing oil and water. You cannot do both at the same time. They don't mix.
No.
So for us, for the living entity, which is very unique, none of the animals can do that. We have to draw our consciousness inward. We have to draw our consciousness inward, meaning tattva jignasa. We have to make inquiries into the nature of the absolute truth, and that is very difficult, practically impossible to do that while one is indulging or engaging in sense gratification. So that was the point I was trying to make there, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much. Dandavat Pranams.
Okay, I will just share that verse. I said that, Krishna speaking. This is Bhagavad Gita. This is, again, chapter 5, 24. Krishna says, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So in text number 22, Krishna is saying, those who indulge in the senses, they take the consciousness outward. And those who restrain the senses, knowing them to be temporary, who then focus all of their attention inward towards the soul and devotional service, that person truly rejoices and experiences happiness.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Vrindavan Pranam, Prabhuji. Thank you for a lovely class. I heard something very nice that it might be worth sharing. Distraction is actually an attraction of one of the senses to something that we should not be attracted to. So where the sense is being attracted to something, we call it distraction, but actually it's an attraction by a sense that's pulling, one of the senses is pulling us away because it is attracted to something. And that is what distraction is. It's actually quite a nice way of looking at it, where distraction is actually an attraction of one of the senses to something it shouldn't be attracted to.
Yes, very nice, very wonderful example. And Krishna says that whole process of how we fall down in the Bhagavad Gita, while contemplating the object of the senses, one develops attachment. And from attachment, lust arises. And from lust, anger. So everything we do when we let the senses run away, that's what happens. And I think you've captured that in that very nice phrase you've just said, Silas Prabhu. Wonderful.
One other thing, Prabhuji, just expansion on simplicity and simplified living is simple thinking, high thinking is Prabhupada's mantra that's always been there. But we also have examples in Vaishnava history where, of course, we've had Vaishnavas who have had opulences, but they've engaged all of that fully in Krishna's service, like Pundarik, Vidyanidhi. You have, of course, Sudama Vipra, who was, whether he was in absolute poverty or whether he was given substantial wealth, his consciousness remained fully focused on Krishna. So it is more an application of what you have. If the consciousness is, what you have is being applied to Krishna's service and for Krishna's pleasure, then it doesn't matter so much, presumably.
That's true.
But of course, the consciousness has to be lifted to that level. We're not there, but I'm just trying to pull the parallel on the other side. Yes,
you gave a nice example of Pundarik Vidyanidhi, and his consciousness was so deep. When you just heard that verse, Aho Baki, he went into transcendental ecstasy. So yeah, it's not bhakti is a process. Unlike of all of the other processes where one simply has to deny the senses and go to extreme austerity, because the senses will draw one's consciousness outward. But bhakti is such a powerful process that one can engage the senses, but consciousness, in fact, won't be drawn outward. It'll be drawn inward. It'll be drawn inward. So that's so unique and beautiful. And Sutta Goswami has said the verse, Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Jnana Ati Asu Vairagyam, Janam Tad. I just forgot the verse now. Anyway, so he's saying that automatically Jnana and Vairagya come. So bhakti is so powerful that it teaches, it's the only process that we can engage the senses and have no fear that the senses will draw our consciousness outward. To the contrary, bhakti will draw our consciousness inward by engaging the services. So that is something really amazing. Chandrika Mataji says, I like the example of the tortoise as well. Yes, Chandrika Mataji, Krishna talks about the tortoise who draws its limbs inward, and only when it wants to use it, it takes it outward. Very nice example or analogy. So, Shailaja Mataji, you would like to add anything, or you got a question?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji Dandavat Pranam. Sorry, I have two questions. It's about the application of, how they say, like, are the rivers dried? Are they not supplying water anymore? Are there no clothes on the roads? Is it still applicable? That's one. And the second part of it is, it's also said a human being has to do his karma. He has to do some job, occupation to maintain his body, wherein we are not kind of relying completely on the nature to provide our requirements. And in the very practicality, like, even though everything is destined to come to us, but will it come by itself unless we work for it? I mean, I would like to definitely live like the first part of it, but definitely is that like practical, that okay, Krishna will supply and I'll just sit at home and I'll chant like
No. That's not what it meant. So say, suppose your duty is, you are a business person, right? You have a shop, you engage in some business activity, and you do the needful. You do your marketing, you do all what the duties of a Vaishya should do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but there may come a point in time after all your normal endeavors, right? After all of your normal endeavors, still, you're not becoming very wealthy. The other option would be, if you were working 8 hours a day, then you say, I'll have to work 16 hours a day. I'll have to work. Basically, the principle is here, everyone has duties. We should do those duties, and we should do them, and we should have a balance. But we should not become crazy to the point where we neglect our sadhana and so on. No, we can't. Everything needs an endeavor. Arjuna was asked to fight by Krishna. Krishna didn't tell him, Arjuna, you just sit here. It's already in your destiny that your battle is won. You don't have to fight. Krishna told Arjuna to fight. And the result is, by acting through that action, what is destined for you will be there. That is the point. It's not that we sit whole day and chant.
I mean, not exactly what I meant. Like in the first part of that, it says, the nature is already providing everything. It has given us the land, it has given the rain, and you can sow the seeds and you can reap the grains that you need and you can eat. You don't have to work in the factory so hard, it says somewhere. But I mean, nowadays there is no rain and the rivers are obviously dried up. So the lives are turning different.
Well, if you go to Gangotri and you go to various parts of India, there are thousands of sages that live in caves that, just take torn clothes. They drink the water of the river. They eat the fruits of the forest. It's happening. If one goes to Kumbh Mela, normally in Kumbh Mela, all of these sages, they come from the mountain. They come to take bath in the Triveni. So that's there. It's an extreme example for contemporary people. But what Shukadev Goswami is, one should look more at the principle, what he's saying. But certainly, even in this time and age, there are thousands of sages that are living in forests and caves. And there are many videos, you can actually see videos of that, of sages who are living like that. And they're maintaining themselves and they're living, they sleep in caves. Yeah.
Fabulous. Prabhuji, just another one, my apologies. So when the fortune would come to us by means of our endeavor, why does the misfortune comes without our endeavor? I mean, both are meant to come to us at a certain point of time, but nobody tries, nobody works towards having the misfortune or, any negative things in life, but they still do come. Is it the same on the positive side as well?
Yes, definitely. We go to an astrologer And the astrologer will say, you are destined for this, you're destined for that. Yeah, due to our karma. Due to our karma, the happiness and the distress will come on its own accord. It'll definitely come on its own accord.
We work so hard for the health. We do work, we exercise, we eat healthy, and we try to earn the health. But then when we have to fall sick, we don't work towards it. It just comes by itself.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Some of the most healthy people who have followed the best diets, the best exercise routine, suddenly also they fall sick. But the thing is, we are not fatalistic here. Some people, when they hear us speak this philosophy, they will think, oh, we're advocating a philosophy of inertia and, just a fatalistic. No. Prabhupada says a devotee works hard, the devotee does his duty, but at the end of the day, after endeavor, if certain result is not coming, there's no discouragement. There's no discouragement. We do the needful. We do the needful, but we do not become discouraged and lose our enthusiasm, because we know this fact of life, what is destined for us, it's there. Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
got it, Prabhuji, got it. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
So Surabhi Mataji has written something here. Let's see what she's written. Is it easier for happy, satisfied people with good family, well social status to say we should not be attached, or to be attracted to various sense gratifications? Is withdrawing inward easier for that group? No, it's more difficult. It's more difficult, Surabhi Mataji. Why? Because they become so conditioned and accustomed towards getting their so-called happiness from the senses, that for them to withdraw inward is very difficult. Whereas a person who's not had this opportunity to indulge the senses, for them to go inwards and to seek out the absolute truth, it's much easier. So it's easier for the less privileged. Then, although Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for those who have made advancement, he puts them in a well-to-do family. Krishna does say that in the Bhagavad Gita. But those people, although they take birth in a well-to-do family, just because of their consciousness from their past birth, they are not inclined. Just like Raghunath Das Goswami, he was born to the very, very wealthy parents, and he never got bewildered by it, because his consciousness was from his previous birth just to feel inclination towards the absolute. So both are there. Okay, any other questions, comments, or reflections?
Prabhuji, sorry again. So when the Lord says for the person to come to the edges of devotion, I would put him into the difficulties, especially steal the wealth, because it's the major form of Maya. And I think that practically even happens as well. Padashritanam cha sahasrachoram. He'll steal away everything from the one who surrenders, including all his sins, of course. So why here the Lord says he would put them into aristocratic families?
Well, Krishna says, there's different in the Bhagavatam, the verse you quoted. Krishna says when he feels especially merciful to someone, then he'll take away everything. So Krishna can do both. Krishna can show his mercy in the form of giving, and he can show his mercy in the form of taking away. But he says in the Bhagavatam, when he feels especially merciful, then he's more inclined to take away. He's more inclined to take away. There's no contradiction there, Mataji. Krishna can do both. The goal is the same. When someone is born in an aristocratic family, he doesn't have to, like say someone born in a very poor family, you have to work hard sometimes to just get the basic needs, it's a struggle. When someone is born in a well-to-do family, then there's no struggle. One can just flow his mind straight into spiritual life. And yeah, so that's the point, that Krishna puts him in a well-to-do family so that he doesn't have to struggle. He can just dedicate his attention towards Krishna consciousness. And then someone who is he'll also do that if someone maybe not able to go fully into it. He'll take away everything and draw them into Krishna. Krishna knows what's best. He will do the needful for every one of us. Every one of us is different. Every one of us is different.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, I found the Sudama example quite appropriate here. How they were
Yes.
so poor and he couldn't even recognize his wife. He gave so much in return,
Yeah, Krishna gave Sudama so much. So he can give and he can take. He knows what is best. Yeah, nice example. Chandrika Mataji. Govinda Gopi Mataji, I noticed you unmuted yourself. Did you want to offer any comment or question? No?
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice class. I remember Srila Prabhupada. He also wanted to work very hard. He had a pharmacy. He says, I earned a lot of money. I built a temple for Krishna. And then World War II come, everything gone. He's married, he has children. But then in the end, he wanted to give up everything just to follow Krishna with his guru direction. He has done everything to please his guru. So Prabhupada is a good example, Prabhu. It's not our plan. Everything is Krishna plan. Only Krishna knows what is good for us.
Yes, and the devotee, if we take, Krishna takes away, the devotee is happy. Krishna gives.
Yes.
Prabhupada's father used to tell, Prabhupada quotes this, if Krishna wants to give, how much can you accept with your two hands? And if Krishna wants to take away, how much can you hold back with your two hands?
Yes, very good. Thank you, Prabhu. That is very true.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your
so
comment.
much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice class. Haribo.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So it's gone a bit late now, over our time. I think we should close today's session. Thank you very much, dear devotees, for your attendance, your wonderful questions, and your contribution and participation. All glories to your service. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyascha patitanam pavane Ananta Koti Vaishnava
Vrindavan.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Very nice.
Thank you for a wonderful class.
Prabhuji,
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.